Thank you very much, Ruth, and Norwich Consulting, Pricewaterhouse, and Sida for giving me the opportunity to come here. And good afternoon, all of you. Good afternoon. Thank you. You know, in Africa, we're very big on greetings. So if you don't greet me back, I'll start thinking there's something wrong. I'd like to take you back to 2007, which in many respects was a fantastic year to be a Kenyan. Our economy was going through the roof. We had had a political transition 5 years previously where we had gotten rid of a dictator, and even our football team was winning, which doesn't happen that often. And that pride in being Kenyan was at its height on election day in December 2007. As we woke up in the morning and you had long queues of people voting, the lines were jovial, and we're seeing democracy in action. And as we went to sleep on election day after observing the counting of the votes, etc., really thought, no, this is brilliant. Nothing could be better than being a Kenyan in the world today. Well, fast forwarding a few weeks and the disputed presidential results that came out, and the country fell into violence. Sorry? The country descended into violence. And together with a couple of friends, once we got over the initial shock of seeing what was going on, we noticed that a lot of the stories that we were seeing, a lot of the incidences we were seeing around us were either underreported, as in a lot of the details were messed out, or completely unreported. And the further away you moved from Nairobi, the wider this problem became. So we decided to sit together. Very quickly the conversation started on, what can we do to capture all these stories that we're seeing, the underreported and the unreported stories. And the idea came about to build a platform where anyone with whatever technology was available to them could get that information to us. Did we have any humanitarian experience from running a humanitarian organization like Oxfam? No. Did we have any open source experience on developing open source technology? No, we didn't. And did we have a lot of time and, by extension, money? No, we didn't. What we did have in common is that we were all bloggers. And, that just serves to show that we were networked amongst each other. We knew each other and we had credibility amongst each other before we started building the platform. So what is Ushahidi? It's open source software for information collection, visualization, and interactive mapping. And it's also the Kiswahili word for witness or testimony, depending on the context in which you use it. And as an organization, we say we build tools for democratizing information, increasing transparency, and lowering the barriers for individuals to share their stories. We stand on 3 pillars: the platform itself, the software, the community, which is a vital part of the equation, as I'll share a little later on, and the movement, what we're trying to do by this democratizing of information. How does it work? We say we meet you where you are. Whatever technology you have available to you, if you're sitting in the Stockholm Waterfront Congress Center with very fast wireless internet access, and you have an Android phone or an iPhone or an iPad, and you're not listening to me, you can download the Android or iPhone app or iPad app onto your phone. You can access the platform on your website. But we're well aware that for the vast majority of our brothers and sisters around the world have access to only the most basic technology. And while it's important that the platform looks good on Android phones, on iPads, and on very good computers, because usually decision makers have access to the best technology no matter where they are in the world, and it is important to impress them with what you show. It's equally important that for our brothers and sisters at the bottom of the pyramid who have access to only the most basic technology are also equally impressed when they interact with the platform. So yeah, I'm speaking mainly to the grantees here and sharing our story about how we do things. And as an organization, we dislike hierarchy. We only started giving ourselves titles and positions when donors demand that you fill out a title when you're putting out a proposal. We question everything, how things are run, and we embrace innovative thinking and we take risks. And we learn the hard way that sometimes we are human after all. I'll share a bit more about that later. Our technology was built in Kenya, Nairobi, built in Africa, and it scaled globally. But we like to remind people that we started in Africa, we're a technology company based in Africa, and usually if it works in Africa, it will work anywhere. Yeah? So that's the theory anyway. Let's see if it really works. Disaster response, and this is what Ushahidi is, I think, most famous for. The deployment on the left, sinsai.info, is a Japanese deployment, as you can see, translated into Japanese, and it was monitoring the fallout of the tsunami and the nuclear crisis that came after that. And at one point, this was the most comprehensive website with information about that tsunami and the fallout of the nuclear crisis. The map on the right is the Haiti response following the tsunami in Haiti. And you can see over 3,500 reports there and 500,000 views. And it's allowed Haitians to report their location and their needs directly to the first responders. So what we're doing in Haiti is getting messages in, translating them, geolocating, structuring, approving, mapping, categorizing, and reporting it so that the first responders get information that's useful for them, that they can use to plan their response. And the big question was, how do you make that all happen in just 10 minutes or less? These are an example of the various organizations that were working in the Haiti crisis, the first responders who were using the information generated by the Ushahidi, or processed through the Ushahidi platform. And this is just a slide that shows the various different ways the organizations are interlinked with Ushahidi there in the center, getting information in and out of the platform. Another way the platform has been used is in election monitoring. India, the world's largest democracy, the Vote Report India project, where they used the Ushahidi platform to monitor the election, and Uchaguzi. Uchaguzi is the Kiswahili word for elections, and the Uchaguzi deployment is a customized version of the Ushahidi platform built specifically for election monitoring to put citizens at the heart of the electoral process, and I'll be sharing a little bit more about that later. Citizen journalism, Harass Map on the left there is an Egyptian map bringing awareness to sexual harassment in Egypt. And the oil spill crisis map on the right is a map that's monitoring the aftermath of the oil spill on the east coast of America a couple of years ago. From the citizen journalism, this is a very structured map for the Libya crisis. Again, this one was set up by a request from UN OCHA, so a UN body, an official map. It was initially closed to the public and then later on opened up. And as you can, as you can imagine for an official UN map that's going to be used by UN first responders, there are lots of layers of verification, 2 or 3 different layers of verification before the information was sent out to the task team that was responding to the crisis. So basically, we're talking about changing the way information flows in the world, from top down to top up, sideways, whichever way makes the most sense for that particular context. At the beginning, I told you about 2008 and how we got together, and it took us around 3 days to make the first Ushahidi deployment, from when the idea was initially mooted to putting together the software, buying the domain name, throwing it out there, and getting it to a state where people could actually send in information. It took us around 3 days to get that platform up and running. Now, because we're an open source company, the technology is there, you can download it and install it on your own servers. We talk about, it can take you around 3 hours, considering you have to buy a domain name, set up the databases, through the software up there to get your own deployment running, at least from the technical point of view. But if you're in the middle of a crisis and things are going south, 3 hours may be a little bit too long. So now we talk about 3 minutes to get your own map up and running. And how do we do that? Through CrowdMap. CrowdMap.com is the Ushahidi deployment in the cloud, where it's hosted for you. If you don't know or don't want to bother about the technology and you just want to get a map up and running as quickly as possible, you can go to crowdmap.com, and more or less as simple as signing up for an email address, you can be up and running from a technology point of view, I should stress, pretty quickly. So all the business people in the room, I'm sure you're all wondering about the numbers. 4.5 years, over 30,000 different deployments off the page even. And the software has been used in over 156 countries and been translated into 32 different languages. And these two figures, the 30,000 plus deployments and the 152 countries, 32 languages, is one of the clearest examples of how you can scale a company by opening up. By being an open source company, open source technology where anyone can use it, anyone can download it, anyone can deploy it, it allows this type of scale to happen in under 5 years. I mean, we don't know most of these deployments and we don't speak all those 32 different languages, but the community gets engaged and uses the software for whatever purpose they need, and they take it to the next level. Another big plus from being an open source company and opening up our technology is that you get fantastic volunteers that jump in. One of these groups is the Standby Task Force, which is basically a community of people, over 900 volunteers around the world, who have formed a crisis mapping team, so that when a crisis hits, there's a team in place immediately available who have the experience necessary to start mapping that crisis. So after the earthquake in Christchurch in New Zealand a couple of years ago, it was noticed that there's need to have a rapid deployment team, and the Standby Task Force are one of those teams, not a part of Ushahidi, but they use the Ushahidi software, and another example of how volunteers can help scale. That's the Ushahidi story. Now, Ushahidi is based in Nairobi, and we quickly realized that, as a technology company in Kenya, we need to have more than one success stories, and we need to have a base where people can come together and share these sorts of ideas. And that's why the iHub was born, again, launched by the same people who founded Ushahidi. And the iHub is basically, it was launched in March 2010, when we needed a space in Nairobi where people could come together and, as a technology community, as a home for the technology community in Nairobi. We have 3 main funding partners, apart from Ushahidi, Omida Network, and Hivos. And we have corporate partners as well who provide us with the fastest internet in the country and lots of innovative products that help us make the community, make the space a very cool space to work. So, why did we do this? Like I said, the need to learn from each other. Interesting things happen when you get people with ideas and put them in a room and force them to interact. I remember the first day we opened the iHub, lots of arms crossed, lots of people looking at each other suspiciously. Why would I share my idea with you? Why would I tell you what I'm thinking? Why would I tell you what I'm up to? You might take my idea and steal it or run with it. But soon, people get together and start talking, and they realize that, the solution to the problem or the missing link in their company may not be across the world, may be right next to them. And that's where you get, people partnering up, sharing ideas on how to take their companies to the next level. We organize events where people can get exposure, can share their ideas to other people in the tech community, locally and internationally, and get a lot of support for that. We have a newsletter that has a wide circulation across the region in the tech industry, so you can share your information there. We have the biggest technology job board in East Africa, where people hire and get jobs. And we have lots of corporate events and trainings at the iHub, which is an innovation hub at the heart of Kenya. And we organize fire chats with the biggest names in technology around the world. I'm sure some of you recognize the gentleman in this picture, where we get the biggest names to come in and talk to local techies in Kenya. The strategies that help us survive, iHub research. In the last 4 years, the biggest question the biggest response we get from people about Ushahidi is that, your software doesn't work. There's no evidence that it has impact. There's no evidence that it's made a difference. And we always say, the evidence is there, there's just no research. No one is doing the research on the evidence. So to plug that gap, iHub research came up, and they provide the justification for a lot of what we do. iHub consulting, You need a large deployment. You need to, techies with a wide range of skills. But you don't want to, go out and find lots of credible people. You don't want to go out and sign lots of different contracts. So that's where iHub Consult comes in, where we step into that gap for you and we find the best developers, the best coders, the best project managers, and allow you just to focus on running your project. There's the UX lab, to develop a user experience culture in Africa, as well as, build up user experience professionals in Africa to test your product, to test your innovation before you take it to market. And finally, there's the iHub cluster, which is opening very soon, which is, going to be Kenya's first supercomputer, the Isiolo cluster, where we hope we can deal with big data and other high-performancing issues. These are all strategies that help us, allow us to scale and allow us to do things that take us to the next level. The M Lab is a sister lab to the iHub, and it's a mobile and innovation and mobile application developing center. And there are lots of companies in there that are launched from incubation into fully fledged companies. The key component for the iHub community, if it doesn't benefit the community, then we won't do it. We get a lot of money thrown at us to do lots of things that don't make sense for the community, and we say no to that money, because it's all about the community. We live and die on the basis of the community. We've got over 8,900 members, but probably the most significant statistic is that over 30 companies in the 2.5 years since the iHub was launched have launched out of the iHub. In the initial days, we were a bit worried that it would just become a very glorified, cool cyber cafe where people would turn up, do their Facebook, and leave. But this is one of the key metrics, over 30 companies that have been launched in the iHub in the last 2.5 years. Bringing you back to Ushahidi, I always say that, one of the key lessons we've learned is that it's bigger than the technology. Let's talk about elections, for example. In 2010, we launched the Uchaguzi platform, which, as I mentioned, is our election deployment platform. And basically, we're trying to put citizens at the heart of election monitoring and turn all citizens into election observers. So we turned the iHub, which I just explained, into the command center, the situation room for the Uchaguzi deployment. And we received an SMS about young men congregating with machetes around a polling station in Molo, which is over 200 kilometers away from Nairobi. And if you remember to the back of the Ushahidi story, this is where we started, election violence. 15 minutes after we got that SMS, over 100 police officers turned up at that polling station. So was it magic or is it something else? Well, this is what happened. Those of us familiar with, the election story in Kenya know that Molo is usually a hotbed of violence. It's one of the hotspots where you may expect violence in an election. So you've mapped that in advance. You know which areas the hotspots are. The SMS is received at the Uchaguzi Control Center over 200 kilometers away from Molo. We forward that information to the domestic election observers who have a presence at every polling station in the country for verification. Once they confirm that information is correct, we forward that information to Uwiano, which is the government security platform, and they have very good links with all law enforcement agencies. Uwiano notify the police who trust the information they receive from the Uwiano platform, and less than 15 minutes later, the cops turn up at the polling station. So if you sent that SMS, it's like magic. You sent an SMS, 15 minutes later, 100 policemen turn up. The fact that it went through 4 different agencies, 4 different organizations before that response happened is what those of us at Ushahidi and the iHub and in this room do. Those are the kind of partnerships that make or break us. So technology is at best only 10% of the story. It's a vital 10%. All this stuff is very important, capturing information, storing it, media monitoring, geolocating, but it's only 10% of the story. The other 90%, media monitoring, sourcing, analysis, verification, is what really makes technology successful or not. Another key lesson that we've learned is, sometimes the messenger is as important or even more important than a message. If I take you back to the election deployment, if I turn up to a week before an election and tell you, hey, if you see any violence, send an SMS to this number, you don't know who I am. I've got no credibility with you. If something happens in Stockholm now and I tell you, we've set up this deployment, send us information about anything you see in Stockholm, I've got no credibility in you, you probably won't take it up. If in Stockholm, Sida tells you to do that, then that's probably going to get a bigger response. When it comes to elections, we usually partner with local grassroots organizations to spread the message about the deployment. The messenger is sometimes as important or even more important than the message. The key lessons we've learned in the last couple of years, brutal decision making. If you make a mistake, own the mistake and own it fast. Release early, don't wait for perfect code or perfect conditions. They'll never come. Get the product out, get it out early and start using it. Do it yourself. If we had sat around waiting for someone to map all these underreported stories, you probably wouldn't have that up to date now. And as I said, we live and die on the basis of our community. And probably the biggest lesson for any up-and-coming entrepreneurs, any up-and-coming companies is, don't wait for the money. If you wait for the money, you'll never move. Just start moving, build a product, and hopefully the money will follow you. So thank you very much. That's our story.
Well, thank you. That was indeed really, really interesting. I think even with my slight technical background, there were a few things that maybe went a little bit over our heads there. You explained very quickly, and everything is happening at speed, of course. Yeah. But perhaps you could just explain a little bit, when we were to use platform, it's such a little bit of a buzzword as well. Can you explain a little bit more, what is the platform that Ushahidi has developed, and what are the key components in that? Yeah.
Well, at Ushahidi, we basically have 3 key products. One is the Ushahidi platform itself. It's the software that you can set up to collect information from a large group of people, and you can run that on your own server or your own, or you got to use CrowdMap, which is another software that we develop where you can run the software in the cloud. You don't have to install it yourself. So it's basically the software that allows you to collect information from a large group of people and display it on a map. The third product we have which is in alpha, beta now, about to be released, is Swift River. And Swift River basically allows you to organize a large amount of information in a way that makes it accessible and that you can work with it. For example, in the Mumbai bombing or the Mumbai crisis a couple of years ago, there were a couple of people set up on Ushahidi deployment, and they were getting over 1,000 messages per hour. If there are 2 of you, that's 500 messages each. So it becomes a crisis handling a crisis. And that's where Swift River plugs in, where it allows you to deal with a lot of information coming to you very quickly.
I mean, you're an organization of just you're only about 20 people in the core team of Ushahidi, is that right?
That's right, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have done an amazing work on setting up a number of other platforms, etc. I mean, do you even have time to maintain them? Or is it a thing about, yes, we're floating something, we're spinning something off, or are you taking care of the whole maintenance of these ones as well, or do they have to live their own lives, so to speak?
Yeah, certainly. We're more or less divided into 2 teams. There's the core technology platform team who build the software, keep improving it, make sure it works. We have a constant release cycle where the software is updated continuously. Then we have the operations, marketing, project management side where I sit in, where we come and give talks and run some of the bigger deployments and also try to get the business self-sustaining to a position where it's self-sustaining.
It's interesting you talked about the iHub as well. I can mention for everyone in the room who hasn't checked out or yet discovered iHub, ihub.co.ke, and you can be actually a member at a distance as well, and then you get some of the news and the research there. I would really recommend, if you're interested in ICT for Africa, all the reports and documentation there from the research projects are being published. So that's a great source of information in the wider ICT area. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
My name is Joseph Zachariah. I have just one question. Obviously, this is an enormously strong platform, the way you presented this. Now, what is the security aspects of it? In other words, is there any potentials that somebody can hack this into and use this platform to distribute information, malinformation, or what security level you have on this platform? Thank you.
We will take the second question while I'm down here as well, since I'm running with the microphone.
My question is, you might expect that one from me. If you're set up as a business or as a charity, and how do you generate revenue to pay for your team? Thanks.
Yeah, coming to the first question, I think there are two components there. One is the security of the software itself, whether the software is secure. And we're constantly working and improving and partnering with some of the largest security organizations in the world to make sure that the software itself is secure, that it's very hard to hack into, and the information that you get into the platform is credible. The other aspect is, people feeding false information into the platform, and that's not really a technology question. That's a human question. The best way to mitigate that, again, it comes down to the partnerships. Who's feeding you information? Once you receive that information, the methods you put in place to verify that information. We have some, very close deployments that are run, for example, by professors doing research, where only their research assistants can feed in information. And in that instant, it's very easy to verify the source of information. If you're talking about, an election deployment where you're asking all the citizens in the country to send in SMSs to you, you of course don't know each one of them personally. And that's why, like in the example I showed, we partner with organizations like domestic election observers who we know are credible, who have a presence across the country, who can verify some of the information that we get in. So the verification and security question, on the technology side, we keep up to date with the latest security. On the platform side, it really depends on the methodology that you use to when you're deploying the platform. The business question side, currently we're about 60%, 55% donor grant funded from some of our partners, and the other money comes from value-added services and other products that we sell, for example, software as a service. One of my jobs, one of the operations side job, is to try and flip that and move it further and further ahead so that we become self-sustaining. So that's one of the ways that we're moving forward.
Any more questions? We have a break soon as well where you get a chance. Yes, one last question.
It's Lewis Temple here from IDE. I can see on the presentation up there you've got as a possibility for the crowd map, document a zombie invasion. How many zombie invasions have you documented so far? Zombie invasions.
Yeah, the zombie map is a very important map that gets a lot of action, usually around Halloween. I think there are about 2,000, maybe 3,000 zombie reports. So if you do see any zombies, please, report them to the zombie map. And it just shows you, a lot of people equate Ushahidi with disaster response and crisis response. But some of the best maps out there are just, lighthearted maps. There's the burger map, for example, which maps the best burger joints in North America. There's a Ugali map, which does the same for Ugali in East Africa, for those of you who are familiar with Ugali. And yeah, there's zombie maps and certain maps like that.
This is what happened with open platforms. It's amazing. All communities and all sorts of communities exist. Well, thank you very much. And as a small symbolic thank you from us, you will get a box of Swedish treats outside, as well as Hugo will have that. Yeah, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we had some really good example here of how business can have social impact and how you can develop inclusive business models. We're going to take a break of about 15 minutes. So after that, we will also add another element to this, which is ecology, and look at socio-ecological innovation with Per Olsson, a researcher at Stockholm Resilience Center. So please be back at 3:45. Thank you.